We're heading into spring now, and the post-Christmas few months, it's a bit slow in publishing. There aren't so many really great books that are coming out that really sort of have captured my imagination, at least. But now that we're going into spring, more and more titles are beginning to be released that excite me in various ways, or books I'm actually more inclined to be picking up. And of course, these books, particularly the debut titles, come through the bookshop for proofs, so that booksellers can get to know these books and help to sell them, particularly when it's a name that people might not know of. So I've got 3 books here that I've read that are coming out over the next 3 months that I have really enjoyed, but ones that I think are going to be really sort of popular here on BookTube. I think if you watch my channel, then perhaps some of your interests align with mine, and I think some of you will then find things within these books that will excite you or would want you to pick them up. So the first book I have is being released on the 21st of March, so it's coming soon, and I know the author is already beginning to pick up some buzz for it on her Twitter account, and it's one that I think could possibly be one of BookTube's darlings this year. I think it has the potential to be one that a lot of people are talking about, and that's The Old Drift by Namwali Serpell. Now, as you can see, this book is a bit of a chunky book. It's a big book, and it requires to be a big book, because it's one of those sort of big weaving dramas that looks at 3 different families and 3 different generations within those families and how their stories sort of come together. The Old Drift is a book that's set in Zambia, which I think we don't see much of in the sort of popular African literature that we are now beginning to get and everything. And it has this really interesting take on examining sort of Zambia through the lens of fiction. And because of that, I think that was something that really drew me in, and something that I think will open people's eyes to other sort of experiences of African people in diaspora, but also of different experience within Africa itself. Now, what I find most interesting about this book is, and actually I think the author herself tweeted an article about what the word diversity means today, and how it's beginning to almost lose its meaning because it's used in a way that might not actually mean what it truly means anymore. But if you're looking for something that actually can tackle the concept of diversity, it's this book. It looks at Zambia in a way of its kind of full colours. It doesn't give just a pure Zambian experience. It gives an experience of settlers within Zambia, experiences of the country from the perspective of various different peoples within it, and in how their experiences are passed down through generations, and how sort of children of a more contemporary time whose sort of ethnicity or nationality is becoming much more and more mixed, how they experience the role of their own identity as being Zambian but also being other to some extent. Now, this book sort of deals with a sort of magical realist take on a few specific moments in Zambian history. And I think one thing that I probably wanted a bit more out of this book was more of that magical realism. It started off strong at first, but as it kind of got towards the end, it petered out a little bit, but then it picked up in a more sci-fi way as we're getting to the contemporary age and beyond a little bit. This, I guess, makes sense because a lot of people are referring to this book as sort of similar to Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but also similar to David Mitchell. And I think that's probably why I was mostly intrigued by it. And I think it definitely has those roots to it, but I think it also subverts expectations and actually is something different and completely in and of its own self. In my own personal opinion, I enjoyed the first few parts a lot more than I enjoyed the final part. I think the final part took the story in a way that is something that doesn't interest me so much, but I know that a lot of people are going to really enjoy that final part. Now, that final part is kind of going to give the whole book a greater meaning. Like many stories that sort of span multiple generations within multiple families, there are sort of links between them all and connections that you as a reader pick up slowly throughout, which makes reading it such a joy and such a thrill, and it makes it really satisfying when you do finally get to those points where a circle has been completed and you're starting a new circle. And I think that's something I really like about this genre, and I think that's something that makes the meaning and the messages behind this book very powerful. So keep your eye on this one. It's coming out very soon, and I really think people on BookTube are going to love it, and I think there's going to be a lot of buzz about it, and the buzz might crop up in more than one way throughout this book. So the next book is going to be released in April. There are a few releases in April that I'm quite excited about. Also, it's my birthday in April, so I get to keep my eye out on those perhaps as possible birthday presents. But this one is one that I requested from one of our reps who comes down, and that's The Forest of Wool and Steel by Natsu Miyashita. Now this book is a, I guess, Japanese coming-of-age story in which a young man decides that he wants to be a piano tuner. There's a reason that he wants to be a piano tuner. When he's at school, he listens to another piano tuner tune the grand piano in their sort of assembly hall, and the notes that he hears reminds him of his home. This book is set in the northern islands of Japan, in the mountains, and that's where the boy originally comes from. And the mountains and the forest around him play a big role in his life and play a big role in him deciding what he wants his future to be. And then his journey of learning to be a piano tuner also mixes with his understanding of like home and of his own identity. We basically span his entire apprenticeship of being a piano tuner, and he then visits various people's houses. And these other characters, not only the sort of masters who are teaching him the art, but also the people who own pianos and who are pianists, kind of alter his experience and give him more reflection. I think like many other Japanese books, this book is very slow and very introspective, and it kind of deals with a very simple idea and in a very simple way, but has a lot of punch to it and a lot of power. And it was very moving at some points and very wonderful. And I think the uniqueness of it being that the main character wants to be a piano tuner despite not knowing how to play the piano and not really having much care about music, gives this book quite a nice spin that you probably weren't expecting it to. I don't think this book is going to be for everyone, but I do think that those who kind of enjoy that more slower paced and more ethereal Japanese literature can really sink their teeth into it and get that from this one. And finally, the last book that I want to talk about is going to be released in May, and I've just recently finished reading this, and it was probably one of my favourite books of the year I've read so far, and that is She Would Be King by Wayétu. Now this book is a sort of magical realist retelling of the creation of the country of Liberia. So again, we're getting an African story and an African experience which I think is different to sort of the ones we might hear when we read sort of like Nigerian literature. Mostly because I think what's most interesting is when you think of Liberia, a lot of people claim that Liberia is one of the 2 countries of Africa that was never colonized. And I think this book tackles that issue really well and says, you know what, if you're going to go on technicalities, here's what colonization actually really means, and I think it explores that in a very beautiful way. Now this book follows 3 different characters. Bessa, who is from the Vai people, who are a tribe who traditionally occupied part of the land that we now know as Liberia. And then there is June Day, who is a child of slaves within the southern part of North America. And then we have Norman Aragon, who is a mixed-race man from a Jamaican Islander woman and a British white man. So then we get 3 very unique perspectives to this book. Each one of these characters has sort of a gift or a curse, and that is very much dependent on their contexts and how they see themselves. It's a story about how different Black communities came to what we now know as Liberia and sort of helped to form it. But it takes this notion of colonization and looks at how very easy it is to colonize a land, even if you think you are not doing that. So for example, the Black African American slaves who came back to Africa, who came back to what they wanted to be their land, that was denied them previously. And then it sort of looks at how when they settled in Liberia, they ultimately colonized it and instilled their own hierarchies, which reflected very much the Western hierarchies, and they kind of had these notions of the tribes people who had existed on the land before as uncivilized and something to be wary of. But then it explores the story further. And because we have 3 different perspectives that we're seeing the story from, we are actually gleaning it as a story that's not just black and white, it's not just this or that. There's no true evil. There's a lot of histories and there's a lot of personal anecdotes which shape our views and our opinions. And I think it makes this book so much more balanced but so much more poignant at the same time, and really gives you the space to make your own perhaps more informed decision about this. Of course, it is a fictional retelling of the creation of Liberia, so you've got to take some things with a pinch of salt. It's not going to be an entire truth, it is a fictional book. But I think it does open your eyes to the depths of what colonization could be, and I think that it does it in such a beautiful way. Language is very important in this book, and the language within which this book is written, I think, just really made it what it is, and I think that's something that, again, a lot of people are going to really take away from it. This book has already been released in America, and I haven't heard much buzz about it, but I really hope that more people do read it, because it definitely is worth the read. So there are 3 books coming out this spring. I'm hoping that these are ones that perhaps you might not have heard of, but deserve to be heard of and deserve to be talked about more over BookTube. And I hope that you are excited for these books, because they are ones that I think can stir a lot of excitement, can stir a lot of discussion also. And I think the sort of things that the adult side of BookTube looks for in the books that we talk about online are all found within these books in different ways. So that's all for this video, and I'll see you soon for another one. Bye bye.